I remember seeing Bambi. I think my mother took me to see Bambi. I remember that was in a. I actually remember the event, and I was young. I must have been around 4 or 5 years old. But I remember the folding chairs, being scared to shit, out of my mind. The event of, I think my first visual event was the cinema, not the television. You dig? It wasn't, and the TV then was just little black and white with people talking. I mean, it wasn't. So I didn't. It was a while before the cinema became where you saw movies on TV. Back in New York, back in the 50s, there was a show called $1 Million Movie, right? And they show all kinds of crazy shit. I'm sure they showed. For us, we saw like Godzilla and King Kong and Son of Kong. They showed the movies 3 times a day on a Saturday. So you saw one movie you liked as a kid, as 7 or 8 year old. You saw it every night of the week and 3 times on Saturday. And believe me, Rodan, Godzilla, we watched them motherfuckers as many times they showed them. These crazy Japanese fucking movies. We started making films as a kind of an offshoot of our rock and roll thing. We were like, we had a band. So Nicky, the writer of, my writer growing up and, wrote for a lot of my stuff. And Mac was another guy who was with us. We had a rock band, and then we started shooting like home movies. This is like, I was like 16, 17 years old. This is like now in the mid-60s. This is like 67, 68. This is like 10 years before the Driller Killer. We were making movies then. So, first films we made, I was in high school. So, and then, we went to university. And I came to England in some kind of crazy exchange program. The university back, for us, it was basically staying out of Vietnam. I remember I didn't even want to go to university. But it was kind of it. And also it got us to the equipment, the film equipment to make a movie then. We made the Super 8 stuff, but then we knew we wanted to take it to the next level of, of sync sound and Nagras and, Bolex. Well, you got to get beyond the Bol, the Eclair and the Airy. And I remember I was like 19 or something. The school was outside of Oxford. And somehow I hooked up with some BBC guys. Actually, I shot like a 35 millimeter short with this BBC crew. I don't know what I bullshitted them about to tell them I was a filmmaker or something. But anyway, through the school. And, Nicky's film, The Hold Up, Could This Be Love was final. That was like kind of our, final year in school.
You brought a prostitute here?
That's right.
What the hell are you going to do with her?
She's all yours.
Mine?
We just stayed in school because if you weren't in university or had some connection to university, you didn't have the equipment. We weren't going to NYU. We were going to these crazy Rockland Community College. And I went to Purchase, which was a legitimate school, but it was like a state school. And but at a certain point, you have to get out of school and, make a living, or really try it, So the Driller Killer we did 9 Lives, which was a, porno film. It was a straight up hardcore movie. At some point you have to transition to making, university films to actually seeing if you can make a living at it. So it's like it's a big step from making student art films to making a hardcore porno film. But we knew there was an audience there. There was a world out there. This was when we came to New York City and, went for it. But after one experience of doing that, we knew that wasn't our thing. So that's when the Driller Killer, kind of came about.
Now you're going to see it. What's going to happen?
Driller Killer in the very beginning, because I'm coming from back then, I'm coming from the Stan Brakhage time, Michael Snow. I'm talking, guys who were very experimental filmmakers. You know what I mean? Where you'd be looking at burnt, flash frames. I've got that influence of the Michael Snow, whatever. We did the porno, we did 9 Lives and, kind of caught between how do you take Michael Snow and Brakhage and I once saw actually in the part of my film, my university days was seeing Nicholas Ray. He was teaching at this state school way the fuck up in New York somewhere, actually near Rochester where they make the Kodak. And I seen Nicholas Ray, actually seen him, with the patch on his eye, the leather pants, he's fucking a chick, the students, he's making Gun Under My Pillow. He was just the most rock and roll motherfucker you ever seen. You know what I mean? He was old as the hills too. And he was, and then it was like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Oliver was around at the time, And, I think the thing about the Chainsaw Massacre was it was a film that they made for like $25,000 or $40,000. And it made like $30 million. I mean, it was but legitimate, like in Variety at the time. It'd be the 50 top grossing films, right? And 10 of them were porno films. Okay. And in fact, the producer of the Driller Killer was a guy named Arthur Weisberg. And he was a gangster from Detroit. These guys were in the porn. They made a film called Debbie Does Dallas, right? That did these crazy stories. They make it for $30,000, made $35 million, that kind of book. But we're trying to raise money to make films. So if you got a page out of Variety, you can go to somebody and say, "Hey, here's Texas Chainsaw. They put up $35,000 and made $35 million." That's at least you got something to go on. And I knew we could make a film like Texas Chainsaw. You dig? That we can make. I don't know about some of the other films out of Hollywood if we could have made them at the time, but that one I'm sure we could have done. You know what I mean? Although I like the film a lot. Well, Nicky was writing the script, so we would work when we first started doing it. We would shoot weekends. You dig? Like we had like a game plan on it. Plus, Nicky's a brilliant writer, so he's writing the scenes as we're going along. The way I really like to work, actually, like let the film play itself out. Let's discover the film during the shooting. Let's not precipitate the movie. You dig? Okay, you could do it in the writing, and you don't know when you write a screenplay, you don't know the ending of the script, basically. I hope you don't. You don't start from the end coming. But maybe some people do. But to organically make that film, so the process takes you to the film. I mean, that's the key. So Driller Killer actually was we were there then where we're trying to get to now. You dig? Because every time you're trying to finance a film, everybody wants a script. So then you give them 50 pages, you give them 30 pages. So you give them some bullshit script that you're not going to do to get you to the film you're going to do. You dig what I mean? But we didn't have to do that then. That was a natural process. We started shooting. We knew these scenes. We wanted this. We had the characters. We had the world. The world was the world we're living in. New York, 1977, 1978. And, the character himself was the painter the guy is the rock and roller. Doug was his name. What's he called? Tony Coca-Cola in the movie. He was the driving force. I mean, he was the painter, and all those paintings are his, and that's his girlfriend. And so I was basically filming a friend of mine's life, and he was from L.A., so he had this real, New York at that time, Fifth Avenue was like they're living in cardboard boxes on these streets that are like 18th Street and Fifth Avenue. you know, you have these ex-Vietnam guys just living there, man. You know, washing windshields of cars. It's just, you know, it's like Cannery Row. This was, well, you see it in the movie. You dig? We just went outside our window and there it was. I mean, we were using Jung's book on schizophrenia, right? Dementia, what do you call it? Dementia praecox, some crazy word. But there's this real thin book that was pretty, that we had it all marked up and lined up, you know, about, you know, an actual schizophrenic, because this was the deal. You know, the guy would live in a double life. You know, it was like a Jekyll and Hyde deal, you know. But it was, you know, the cat himself wasn't far from, you know, it was just an extension of, yeah, of life in the street, of survival. At this time, you know, I was looking at an actor, but I knew we were going to make this film. I didn't know how long it was, you know, it could have took 10 years to make it. I remember I asked Johansson to do it, David Johansson, of the Dolls, you know. Our composer was in his band, was Buster, but that was later on. You know, I mean, we're going to start shooting one weekend. We're going to start shooting. How many weekends you can take to make, you know, and we didn't even know what the fuck we were doing. So it's not like now we're shooting these features in 15, 18 days. I mean, Miss 45, that film, those films took forever. We didn't know what the fuck was, you know. We had to learn how to do it. You know, now we got it down, but so I didn't know how long the fucking thing was going to take, you know. So I'm thinking, well, am I going to get an actor that's going to be, tell some guy what are you doing for the next 3 years? You know what I mean? It just wasn't practical. We're not paying anybody. It was just, and I, you know, if I had the guy, you know, if I had the relationship that I have now with some of these guys, especially say with Willem, you know, then it would have been, and then he would have played it. You dig? But I didn't have that then. And it was just the, you know what I mean? It was just the thing. I mean, we're going to do it. Let's do it, you know. You make a big deal of who's playing the fucking Driller Killer just as long as somebody's going to be there. You know what I mean? It's not like, the character's a little bit bigger than the actor. You know, when you're the Driller Killer, okay, if you're going to play, you know, a normal person, you're going to play the fucking Driller Killer. I mean, it's not like we're looking for Laurence Olivier. I mean, the actions speak louder than the words. You know, you're drilling somebody in the head. We don't have to worry about if you're from fucking, you know.
See what you got a sad story, man? What happened? Your girlfriend left you. You know, your wife fucked the shit out of the landlord. That's what happened, huh?
There's a cat that used to work at that in this kind of film place where we rented the equipment. It's called Ross Gaffney. It was in New York back in the day. You know, and you got the equipment very cheap. It was like a low-rent house, and you edited there and all that, and they had the editing rooms. And this cat would be there, and his name was James Lane, and he had it outside the editing room. And man, you'd go there in the morning, he'd be there. In the afternoon, he'd be there. And now, I didn't even know what he was editing. And he'd always be there. And you say, come on, let's go out for coffee. No, I got to cut. He was like the most dedicated motherfucker I ever seen in my life. You know, working by himself. No, I said, you don't have any assistants? You know, no, I can't have any. You know, he was like a, what is Gibson called? Garage mechanic? Yeah, garage Kubrick. You know, he was like, I never seen a dedicated motherfucker. Then one day we went and he was gone. The room was empty. I never saw the guy again. I didn't even know what film he was working on, you know. But anyway, so that's what Jimmy Lane comes on. We used a pseudonym for 9 Lives because of, you know, you can get busted. There was, you know, then they started coming down on the porno business. You know, it was the bust was actually, I don't know, pornographic materials crossing straight state lines, some fucking crazy fucking deal. So then we all use different names to do on that one. So it was kind of an extension of that. Who knows where these films, you know what I mean? I mean, we don't, you know, it's not like, you know, they end up in a can back then. You know what I mean? You don't have digital things, you know, you can't fucking Vimeo them out to 1,000 people and know somebody's got it. You know what I mean? They're there. And then they're gone, and then they're gone. I mean, you know, the beautiful thing about a negative, and the film is, you at least have something, you know, in case the worst case nightmare of the hacker from another planet like neutralizes every image ever taken. So every film ever made, every photograph ever taken, every email ever written is now 000. Doesn't exist. Okay? How's that for an idea for a film? Okay? At least if you had a film, you'd have the piece of film. If you had a fucking hard copy of a picture, you'd have it. Okay?
Mr. Reno, it's a very simple philosophy, Mr. Reno. It's very, very simple. That's the kind of idea I think we should have. But now, what is it? What the colors? You must know, you must feel a color. You must feel me. What is it of me that you were putting on here? You don't talk to me. You're trying to scare me, man.
Well, Driller Killer is basically a documentary of the life we led through the character, the guy I was living with at the time, Metro. No, man, I feel everything's a warm-up. We're ready to, we're rocking and rolling now, I'm not, this is a good preamble to, when the Passman said, he writes a 1,700-page novel, he says, well, that's a good preamble to what I really want to say. We're about to make our first movie, This was a good warm-up. These are preliminary fights. Now we're going for the main event.